Hello everybody. You may remember Mia, she was here last year for the Riot album ranking, and today you're dressed up as a pirate. Why is that?
Because today it's running wild.
Resilient kicks off well with Soldier of Fortune and the title track, but as the album goes on it feels more and more like an amateur band is trying to imitate Running Wild. In a song like Fireheart, for example, you realize how they aim at past glories, but despite the speed of the tune, it remains an empty shell. From the 17 studio albums of Running Wild, there are only two I don't like. Shadowmaker is the other one. It has a couple of passable tunes like the title track, Into the Black and Piece of the Action. And the visual concept is an eye-catcher. It looks like a cross between Terminator and Punisher, quite different from the colorful pirate days. These were good intentions, trying a comeback with fresh ideas after the long break. But you know what it says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Rolf recorded this basically alone at home with too much programming. The attempt to create a rock and roll album appears to be a kind of Potemkin village. Behind the facade is not what you would expect. Me and the Boys, for example, with its cliched lyrics, me and the boys, we love this noise, etc., sounds like a poor imitation of Twisted Sister or Motley Crue. Really embarrassing. Rogues on Vogue, an album with a couple of good songs, just not standing out among the other albums. It's too obviously what you expect from Running Wild, ticking all the boxes. For example, The War is the typical 10-minute song to close the album, something that Running Wild developed into a habit after the fan favorite Treasure Island. The difference is, Treasure Island had a complex story to tell and needed the 10 minutes, while The War has rather repetitive lyrics, and when you think it's over after 7 minutes, there's another part attached to push it over the 10 minutes line. The Brotherhood had a difficult stand among fans and critics when it was released, but I think it's okay. Detonator and Pirate songs are short and sweet reminders of Running Wild in the 80s, while the title track has some excellent lead guitar playing. Victory in 2000 was the time when Running Wild turned from a band into a solo project. Songs like Tsar or The Hussar are interesting, the lyrics are opening a new chapter. When Time Runs Out and Into the Fire are also among my favorites. But the musical execution altogether was not quite on the same level as before. Please don't get me started on the Angelo Sasso story again. I met the band upon the release 1998 and had my copy signed. The Rivalry featured several good songs like Kiss of Death, The Ballad of William Kidd or Fire and Thunder. Rabbit Foray has an interesting choice of subjects from Black Bart to Last of the Mohicans. When you listen to the groovy Stick to Your Guns, a sing-along tune like By the Blood in Your Heart, and the mysterious depth of the sea, you realize the musical variety is also there. Good album. The best Running Wild album since the comeback. The title track is also the opener, kicking off the album with good spirit. It doesn't sound tired, that's very important. Crossing the Blades and Wings of Fire are also among the highlights with some excellent guitar work. One Night, One Day is a ballad fairly unusual for the band, but a sure sign they don't just repeat themselves. It appears Rolf had more time than usual to prepare the recording due to COVID lockdown, so eventually that was good for something. Masquerade is probably the fastest Running Wild album, with many aggressive tracks like Black Soul and Soleil Royal. It may not have as much atmosphere as the previous Black Hand Inn, but some tunes like Metalhead are good fun to play again and again. I know I did. One sometimes forgets that Running Wild in their early days were called a black metal band. Songs like Black Demon and Adrian, Son of Satan are here to prove. Unfortunately, some of the best songs the band already had at the time were not included on the LP. They ended up on compilations instead, for example Iron Heads and Walpurgis Night. They even forgot to include Chains and Leather and postponed that to the second LP. The debut album thus fell short of some expectations. Only today, with the CD version, which includes the missing tracks, the picture of early Running Wild is complete. But for an album ranking, I strictly count only the album tracks, not the CD bonus tracks, so the summary is that the first LP is not as strong as it could have been. A strong album with tunes like White Mask, the single Little Big Horn, the title track Blazing Stone, the fast Straight to Hell, and my favorite Slavery, which picks up the dark subject of slave trade on the seas with pounding, powerful drums. Great stuff. Branded and Exiled has a bunch of classics, of course, like Chains and Leather and Fight the Oppression, but also some lame stuff like the slow Mordor and Evil Spirit. I'm also not happy with the production. The vocals sound like they were recorded in somebody's basement instead of a studio. During the time of Port Royal, Rolf got some vocal training to expand his singing style, while in the old days he'd just been barking them out. Some strictly old-school Running Wild fans probably put this album higher in their ranking, but I think the band improved both musically and technically on their next albums. Talking about Pile of Skulls, the first thing that comes to your mind will probably be Treasure Island, Running Wild's epic masterpiece. But there is plenty of more good stuff here, from Fistful of Dynamite to Sinister Eyes. After 4 studio and 1 live album, Running Wild had well established themselves in the metal scene. The 5th studio release, Death or Glory, was the first to be distributed by a major label, Electrola, and hit the German album charts at 45. Running Wild radiated confidence with great songs like Riding the Storm, Running Blood, and of course the single Bad to the Bone, which is a reminder that the band was not just singing about tales of the past but also present-day issues. Running Wild never did the one perfect album that shines more than the rest, deserving to be an undisputed number 1, but they made many records coming close to that goal. Black Hand Inn certainly does, with songs like Free Wind Rider, Fight the Fire of Hate, The Phantom of Black Hand Hill, or my favorite, Soulless. When the fire of evil burns in your heart. Under Jolly Roger, Rawride, Diamonds of the Black Chest, Raise Your Fist, today the 3rd LP by Running Wild is a true metal classic. Moving from black metal towards more melodic power metal, they had discovered their own niche within that type of music. The press didn't recognize this, probably because thrash metal was big at the time, with Anthrax, Megadeth and so on. Thus, Running Wild seemed to be sailing into a wrong direction. Metal Hammer, for example, put Under Jolly Roger on the 3rd place from the bottom in the monthly releases, writing a harsh review. Crash magazine didn't sound impressed either.
Under Jolly Roger offers little reason to celebrate. After a very good and a not-so-good LP, the band ran out of ideas. The time has come to hide the lack of inspiration by copying their own riffs. Superfluous.
A lot of time has passed since Branded and Exiled, and many bands discovered new influences, but for Running Wild, time seems to have stood still. There aren't any big differences to their last piece of work.
You wanna know where you are? In Port Royal. This is probably the Running Wild album I played most often. After growing over the previous 3 albums, developing their own style, Running Wild perfected it on the 4th release. The video for Conquistadors was played a lot on TV back then. Annette Hopfenmüller, Hard and Heavy, if you remember that show. The rest of the album from Uwe Schitschun to Calico Jack doesn't have any flaws either. There were at least 3 other albums I considered putting on number 1, but this one is it then. Tomorrow I might rank them different. Good night.